this video is a little different, but I think is of interest to us as Africans. So here we go. When we in Africa wonder why our systems are so inefficient and never seem to work in favor of the people, especially those who need them the most, the current changes in the US explain why. We are currently watching how our systems terraformed in real time when we look at the changes being implemented to the system in the United States. Therefore, it is important that we not only pay attention to understand, but as my 10th grade chemistry teacher always used to tell us, guard your rond. Where do you think they will go when theirs falls apart? He used to switch his L's and R's and was very strict, but he used to tell us that all the time, and it was something that always stuck with me. So, as of last night, because these things are always done in the night, some uncomfortable changes that will affect people and people actually know, so they'll be forced to care, took place, and I'm going to quickly explain what they were just so Africans can understand. So the current president of these United States ordered a freeze on all federal funds, which will impact Medicare, which is the public health insurance program offering free or low-cost health care for individuals or families with low income. I'm sure you've seen the videos about how much it costs to have a baby in the United States. Without health insurance, a person could be paying upwards of $40,000. Other offices that won't be getting any funding to pay for what they need are the school breakfast and lunch programs, which will affect a lot of children who need food at school, and winter hunger is a painful kind of hunger. The Section 8 Rental Assistance Program, which gives housing vouchers to cover at least 30 to 40% of rent for those in need so that they can have decent housing. This is already strained as demonstrated by the homelessness issue. Title I Education Pell Grants, which provide funds to low-income school districts and low-income students to pursue a higher education, which they don't pay back because these are not loans. He has basically chosen to freeze the social safety nets, which allow a safety net, and most people in Africa are well aware that the next point without a safety net is rock bottom, and the US isn't designed for rock bottom. I mean, we in Africa adapted quickly because we weren't so far removed from the basic organization of our communities, which were organized around a village organization. Most, if not all, our parents grew up in their ancestral villages and experienced urbanization as young adults, so they still understood how to live with dignity when challenges arose. For example, in most homes, water was stored in those 55-gallon barrels because whenever systems fail, the first things to go are utilities like water and electricity. So most houses had different 55-gallon barrels or drums filled with water for the day's use, such as bathroom water, kitchen water, cooking water, washing the dishes water, clothes washing water, garden, lawn and flower garden water. All of this water was stored in different barrels so that life could be easier, because you start to understand how difficult life gets when you don't have access to water. And since houses, at least most houses in Africa, were built with concrete, they don't get as cold without electricity during load shedding, and are not as uncomfortable as long as they're kept clean, polished floors and all, and the yard is nicely maintained, and the fireplace or brazier is turned on for warmth. Most people won't really feel the shift, so they carry on and do the best they can. But wood houses are built kind of different, and these are the houses that are built in the United States. So The current playbook that is being used is something we are familiar with in Africa because it's been done to us. It's called, I'm going to call it slow down economics or slow down public systems. And this playbook has been implemented across Africa and Eastern European countries. And some reports say he's been chummy with the Hungarian dictator. And this is like your president closing up to some very bad individual that they shouldn't be getting close to. You know, they are going to adopt some of the mentality, and it's about to get a little rough for all of you. And they're going to come back and introduce these policies they have learned over there and force you guys into this sort of track. And the thing with this playbook is that the first order of business is usually to ensure that the country is under control by using frustration as a tool to achieve the desired result. This is accomplished by slowing down public services. When we look around the world's dictatorships, the ones that didn't use overt violence to accomplish their mission, we notice frustration of the populace was the tool of choice. And in my personal opinion, we may be observing this happen in the United States in real time as he ordered public offices to pause, freeze, limit, or close their services to the public. And most of us who grew up in Africa have experienced this when, or we know somebody who has, when we had to set an entire day aside for any government office related business, and even then, there was no guarantee that our documents would be processed, even if only a signature was needed. This experience of keeping the appointment, being pointed to a seat in the lounge or the hallway of a building built by Eastern European architects or now Chinese, that is already falling apart with no hope of maintenance, is almost universal in the African psyche. We meet the really kind, soft-spoken, and attentive secretary who we will call Miss B, who looks over whenever she feels our eyes on her but says nothing and returns to her seemingly never-ending paperwork. And 2 hours after our appointment was supposed to start, we find ourselves still seated in the hallway or the lounge while we can hear the person in charge who is supposed to be attending to us chatting on a phone from their office, and this is often interjected by the familiar sound of a swivel chair leaning back, and we silently curse because we know we're going to be here for a while. So let's call him Mr. M, the man in charge. This is sometimes a woman, but it will be a man for this video. So Mr. M pops out of his office to inform Miss B, the secretary, of something, even though he could have used the phone to call her phone line, but he still ignores you, who's still seated there, and quickly ducks back in. And at lunchtime, he stretches as he walks out of his office, turning to inform Miss B he is off to lunch. He nods in your direction and smiles at you while you are still seated there waiting for him to remember that your appointment was now about 4 hours ago. He leaves for lunch and Miss B advises you to do the same, to come back after lunch. So she directs you to a hallway where you can sit and continue waiting. Once lunchtime is past, you head back to the office and are once again pointed to a seat, and maybe a new seat this time because there's someone else there now, and you feel a sigh of relief and hope. This may make them actually help you until you realize the other person has a personal connection or is a foreigner who has Mr. M's attention, and this was enough attention to get Mr. M out of his office, walking out to greet them, offering them refreshments and inviting them back into the office. You curse a little louder this time and Miss B softly chuckles. The two are in there for a good hour, but once they walk out together, everything is in order, and Mr. M is offering reassurances. Mr. M walks the person to the door and rushes back into his office and closes the door. After a few minutes, Mr. M walks out of his office again. He hands the documents to Miss B with instructions to organize them. You hear them say something about the person, their wealth maybe. That previous person was very generous, and the secretary playfully chastises Mr. M as he passes her a little something for herself too. Then he glances your way and smiles. You know to keep calm because being angry will lessen the chances of any progress, and you've already been waiting a long time. As he walks over and finally greets you, he asks you for your documents and doesn't bother apologizing or making inquiries. He knows what you're here for. You hand him the documents with trembling hands, hoping this is going to work. But you soon realize it's not going to happen because he is still standing there in front of you, absently flipping through the manila folder while making faces. Once done, the serious shadow he had before his guest is back masking his face, and he hands the folder back to you without a word, then starts to walk away but stops, then points to Miss B and says, Miss B will give you the required steps. I just need your signature, you mumble with tears threatening your eyes. Yes, my friend, he says, and pauses, obviously wrestling with himself. He sighs. My friend, just let Miss B help you. She is very good at helping people. If you are naive, you are possibly very confused at this point, but if not, you know you had to bring a gift, and Miss B will allude to that after he walks back into the office. She smiles at you, takes your manila folder and flips through it. Well, you have everything in order, which is good, she says like a teacher. But we have backlog, terrible backlog, and you feel your insides melt. I just need his signature, she says. Well, let me see what I can do. She smiles, takes pity on you, takes a manila folder, which she sets on her desk. But for now, I have paperwork to finish, she says before busying herself with the paperwork. An hour or more later, a delivery person makes an entrance, and the aroma of a chicken or meat pie fills the room. Miss B rises from her desk, takes a silver tray, places a Coca-Cola, the pie on a nice ceramic plate with cutlery, salt and pepper shakers, and napkins, and heads to the office. She takes your folder with her and smiles at you. There is laughter as she enters, and muffled voices can be heard. At least she's trying, you tell yourself. When she walks out without the folder, you breathe a sigh of relief. She says nothing and takes a seat. About 45 minutes later, you hear keys jingling in the office and shuffling. Mr. M walks out and says to Miss B, I'm off. She smiles and tells him to have a good day. He didn't sign the form, and your folder is now in his office, and he has gone home. After a few moments of silence, Miss B receives what seem to be her usual guests, secretaries from neighboring offices, who look upon you with pity they try to mask. They chat and giggle about their day and their plans. Then you hear Miss B say to you, he has left for the day. You ask if he'll be back tomorrow, and she says no. He's on personal leave. You ask, till when, in disbelief. Miss B smiles with pity. For 3 weeks. But I had an appointment, you say under a wave of helplessness. This is the normal state of affairs in the developing world. Those countries end third world because the population has failed to build the systems. The systems are deliberately slowed down to a snail's pace to frustrate the population. One thing most Africans value about the West is the efficiency of the systems that get things done in 30 minutes or less. They often say, if our countries had good, efficient, and fair systems, we wouldn't be here. But the inefficiency, slowed down pace, opposed systems across many African countries are a deliberate design. Third world or developing countries are created by a lack of urgency in the public service systems, which is supposed to ensure that the population are well served and well cared for, so that they may remain optimistic and continue innovating for the benefit of the country. Without this efficiency, frustration takes root within the population and starves optimism. The planting of this frustration is deliberate by people like Mr. M, who are part of the cohort, who have agreed to become tools of oppression for a kickback and act to frustrate the population so that the population can become and remain quietly compliant. Quiet compliance is a necessary requirement to control population. In Africa, this control is needed so that the resources that are being exploited and stolen, if we are being blunt, by foreign corporations on behalf of their governments from the East, China, India, Russia, or the West, are needed to ensure that Africans can remain quietly compliant so that they can continue with these processes. Quiet compliance masks the high level of frustration and hopelessness which starves optimism, squashes creativity, and puts an end to innovation that could have competed and threatened those foreign interests which would have had to trade fairly at the standards set forth by the owners of the resources, in this case Africans, rather than unfairly setting their own prices, standards, and rules on African products and resources, which, when we're being blunt, is theft. But I really hope the US isn't being frustrated into quiet compliance to become a Far Eastern territory. It was an experiment that almost worked for the best. And I would suggest more people learn about Hungary, Poland, and the history of the countries that were once part of the USSR and Europe, Eastern and the Western Europe, to orient themselves with what to expect. I really hope I'm wrong because most Americans aren't prepared for something like this. It's like a person who has grown up in American opulence, affluence, and wealth being sheltered, suddenly being placed in a Russian gulag. It will be a very difficult adjustment. In conclusion, most African countries have the unspoken public policy of slowed down economic development, which is why everything takes so long, goes at snail's pace, and everyone pretends, at least the people in the public service offices pretend, not to know what they are doing. But they do know what they're doing, although it is their job to frustrate the population to ensure their compliance, so that the country cannot ever be self-sufficient, because self-sufficiency means Africa will be self-determining, and Africa has not ever needed the world, but the world will always need Africa to be compliant in order to continue exploiting and stealing its resources. I hope you liked this video, and if you did, please like and subscribe. On this channel, we unravel African history for a better world. If you would like to show your support for this channel, you can give to our coffee. The link is in the description box below. Thank you for watching.